All right. All right. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. Um, it's an exciting time. We're less than 5 weeks from the election. We finally got some good general election data, polling from multiple sources. Uh, those of you who are recording this on a Thursday evening, October 3rd, St. A's just released another poll in the last hour or so. I've had a chance to take a quick look at it, and I don't know if any of you have. It basically says we're in the same place that the latest projection uh, sees it as being, which is to say, Harris with a lead that is the same or a little bit bigger than what Biden enjoyed in 2020, a high single digit lead, and Kelly Ayotte with a slight kind of middle to top of the margin of error lead in the gubernatorial race. It was 51-44 in the St. A's poll for Harris over Trump. It was 47-44 for Ayotte over Craig. That one is within the margin of error, and it would not change this projection a whole lot at all, as you'll see in the next few minutes. So I'm going to share, let's see here, share our screen and get this started. All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. Let me summarize what we're going to be doing. And then, like I said, try to take some questions along the way and certainly at the end as well. Going to summarize how we've been evaluating the districts. A lot of this will be the House, some for the Senate. We'll touch on Executive Council as well. A quick update on the political environment. That's a really big deal in this case because of the sensitivity of the statewide race to what happens down ballot. And there have been significant changes since the first projection, which was in mid-August. Along the way, we'll look at some of the original seats that were in the bullseye. A number of them have changed in terms of what the modeling I put together says will happen, particularly in the larger multi-seat districts. And we'll reveal new seats, new districts that have entered the tipping point range because of changes, again, generally to the better, for Democrats in New Hampshire. So here is some of the headline points. Democratic down ballot prospects have significantly improved since the August projections, over 3 points worth, which is an enormous amount. The best case scenarios, as you'll see, have gotten better, but there are ceilings to how well either party can do generally in the general election because of a combination of gerrymandering, the nature of our two parties' bases, and that the reality is very hard to win super red or super blue seats if you're the out party. That said, the worst case scenarios, the bottom scenarios, have gotten enormously better. And so the range of outcomes between the worst, the median, and the best case reasonable potential outcomes has narrowed. The cone of uncertainty is beginning to tighten quite a bit, and it's been tightening up to the good for Democrats. Trump is clearly becoming a drag to the GOP ticket here in New Hampshire. He has not collapsed in the sense that he's not going to get under 40%. He's not going to lose by 15 points. But if he is stuck in the mid 40s, which the moment he appears to be, that will force Kelly Ayotte and down ballot Republicans to have to outperform Trump by several points in a lot of these districts in order to win. Some of them will be able to do it, but it is difficult to do. And what you'll see over the course of this evening, basically the suburbs are going to determine who gets the majority. And it's the exurbs that will determine the margin. Those are some of the new districts that have come in. For those who maybe haven't heard the term before, think of the state and the country as basically cities, suburbs, and exurbs. Exurbs are the ones that are a step beyond the suburbs. So think of Manchester as a city. Think of Bedford and Goffstown and Amherst and Milford as suburbs. Think of New Boston, Mont Vernon, Lineborough. Think of them more as exurbs. They're not quite suburbs. They're becoming suburbs in a lot of ways, and that's good for Democrats, but they are exurbs. So very quickly, some of you have heard this many times, the PVI, the Partisan Voter Index, it measures how much more Democratic or Republican a precinct or a House or Senate district votes compared to New Hampshire overall in statewide general elections. They've been highly predictive over many years. The percentage of the two-party vote, take out third party, libertarian, independent, write-in, the percentage of the two-party vote in statewide elections that Democrats have gotten in recent elections is a little less than half, 48.64. That basically means we've been winning federal statewide elections with great consistency for the last decade. We have struggled at the gubernatorial level, particularly over the last 4 elections. The gubernatorial is weighted a little heavier because of its direct impact to down ballot. And therefore, that basically explains why Democrats entering the cycle had a baseline of 48.64, just a little below 50. So when you see a district is D+3, that means it's voted about 3 points, rounded to the nearest whole number, 3 points more Democratic than the state overall in statewide elections. So that +3 doesn't mean 53. It meant 48.64 plus 3, or 51.64. Now, over 20 years of looking at this, if you're between the threes, extremely competitive. Anybody can win. It really depends on factors that you and I control. Districts between the sixes, many examples of the out party winning in an R+4, a Republican winning a D+5. Doesn't happen all the time, but every cycle it happens. And you'll see tonight, as the Democrats at the top of the ticket have improved their standing, it has increased the number of districts in that range, R+4, R+5, and so forth, that are winnable for Democrats. If folks don't mind muting themselves, if you could double check. I think, Jerry, I think you might not be muted, if you don't mind. And everybody could double check that. Here's the key starting element for tonight. The projected PVI for this November's election, which of course could change in the next 5 weeks. But if the election were today, it is a dramatic change, an improvement in the baseline over what we've been assuming entering the election cycle, as well as what we used in the August projection. So entering 2024, those of you that saw me earlier this year, the baseline number we used was 48.64. The August 14th projection was actually slightly lower. It actually had gone down a little based on what data we did have. This was before the primary, 48.08. But here's what happened. Thanks to a slightly better projection for Harris and a much better projection for Craig, the updated baseline for today's unveiling is 51.51. That's actually 3.43% higher than the August projection. And if that sticks, it would be the highest we've seen since Maggie Hassan and Jeanne Shaheen got elected to governor and Senate, respectively, way back in 2014. It changes the game in a lot of ways. The upshot, if this holds, districts as read as an R1.5 would actually lean slightly Democrat before we even inject variables. That is an enormous difference from even 2 years ago, when districts had to be more than D1.5 in order to start acting in terms of the environment like a Democratic district. It's really a sea change for a lot of House seats and a couple of key Senate seats. One way to look at it, in 2022, only 158 House seats out of 400 ended up being in districts that had a Democratic leaning on election day. Right now, 186 House seats have a Democratic leaning, which means if they would act exactly neutral, like the state, we would be favored to begin the exercise without even getting into anything into 186. That is an enormous positive difference. I'll just do a quick reminder on PAYCO. I created it for this cycle, points above expected candidate outcome. I use it to help identify candidates that do a lot better or worse than what a generic or a replacement level Democratic candidate would do in that race. We'll mention that a few times in this presentation. The higher the number, the better. And a number above 3 or 3.5 is generally a very good number. It means that that candidate is probably bringing unique strengths to the campaign beyond just being a Democrat. For example, local elected officials that elevate to state office tend to have a better PAYCO score. School board members, aldermen, selectmen, retired teachers tend to do a little bit better, particularly if they taught in the area, this sort of thing. And the trend lines, which we're also going to talk about. Suburbs are very quickly moving towards Democrats in New Hampshire, as well as nationally. Blue collar communities are moving in the opposite direction. New Hampshire is one of the most suburban states in the country, one of the most highly educated, highest income, lowest poverty. That means that the trend lines, while there are individual areas that are better or worse for Democrats or Republicans, um, it is on balance better for Democrats because of the nature of our socioeconomics in this state. In trying to put the qualitative on top of the numbers, uh, resource intensity. How big is the House district relative to the number of seats? It's how many voters, not residents. And in some districts, voter participation tends to be lower. And that actually makes doing a mailing or knocking on doors a little cheaper, a little less time intensive, a little easier, a little less resource intensive. How many seats are we talking about that we could potentially flip or hold? How compact is the district? Do we have an incumbent? Are we challenging an incumbent? And how collaborative, and this is where I try to spend time on the road, how collaborative are the candidates with each other in a multi-seat district and with the local and county Dem committees? Candidates that are highly collaborative with each other and with their local and county committees tend to do better, which probably intuitively makes a lot of sense. Okay, a quick review of the playing field coming in. Again, this will help understand what we're about to look at. You can see these are the number of seats of each kind of PBI. The further right, the more partisan. So that tall blue line is D plus 15 or greater. Think Hanover, Keene, Portsmouth. The ones at the bottom left are the ones that are +0, +1, +2, the most competitive in the state. You can see that they're not shaped the same between the two parties. The Republicans have many, many more +5, +6, especially type seats that in a wave year are vulnerable, but in a neutral year are not so vulnerable. This is why the fact that our baseline, our prospects have increased by 3.4 points since the last projection really matters, because it begins to really chip into those 4, 5, 6, those red lines under 4, 5, and 6. Those are a lot of Republican seats in a somewhat safe, and they require the environment to be pretty good. We have a lot more super safe seats than the Republicans do. They have more marginally safe seats than we do. And a positive environment for Democrats chips away at that. This basically shows that last cycle, we held our own at historic levels, and the Republicans actually we made inroads in the light red and even medium red seats. That's where we're going to have to continue to make inroads in order to get the majority. Some of our most vulnerable incumbents are the ones that won in red leaning districts, which probably makes sense. And you can also see that in the sevens, D plus 7, we went 90-0. R plus 7, they went 105-0. I can count on one hand in the last 20 years the number of times the out party has won a House seat that was a 7 or greater. And we have thousands of data points because we have so many seats. The path to a House majority for us. Hold on to all the deep blue, obviously almost all of the medium and light blue seats. We did that last time. This projection suggests we will do that again this time if things hold. And we have to get relatively deep into the light red seats because they're more Republican leaning than Democratic leaning. But again, in this environment, it's a lot easier to get up that ladder. We almost got to 201 last time, and the environment was not as positive as it looks right now. So you see that blue arrow, that's where we got to go. And that means we have to win 30 some odd red seats in order to get to the promised land. The Senate, same idea. We have more super blue seats. They only have one super red seat, but they have a lot that are in the middle, R plus 5, R6, R7. You can see the real competition is on the left side. We have no light blue ones anymore. Most of our 10 blue seats are, most of our seats are quite safe. The Republicans have a number of pretty vulnerable Senate seats, and that's going to be where the opportunity is, and it's getting better for us. And the chart there shows the exact same thing as the House pattern. Same idea. The way we're going to get a Senate majority, hold on to our deep blue and medium blue. We have a couple of light red seats, Shannon Shanley and Donna Soucy, that we already hold. In this environment, those look relatively safe. We take nothing for granted, but they're looking pretty good right now. And that means there are 4 more light pink, light red, and at least 1 medium red that are going to be in the bullseye. And they continue to become more attractive for us because the baseline is getting higher. The political environment is getting higher. So let's talk tipping point. On August 19th, those of you that watched, we had 55 total House seats that were in the initial tipping point, the bullseye. 25 of them were Democratic holds. 19 of them were in Republican-leaning districts, so they were ones that we needed to prioritize. And 6 of them were in light blue districts, generally ones that are moving in a Republican direction. So 25 of the original 55 bullseye seats were holds. 30 of them were and remain flip opportunities. You can see a couple of them were light blue ones that we didn't win last time. We almost won all of them. And then you can see a ton of them, 19, are in the very light red, R0 to R3. And then there were 9 in the medium red that, at least at that early juncture, for a variety of reasons, appeared to be superior flip opportunities, even when the environment was almost 3.5 points less favorable than the current model suggests it is. So here we are. It's October 3rd. We have additional targets. These are 8 new districts that are basically 1-seat districts with one exception. That's why it's 9 seats for 8 districts. All 9 are flips. We do not currently hold any of these 9 seats. They are all held by Republicans. One of them is actually the last Democratic-leaning seat. It's a tough seat. We'll get into it. It is deteriorating quickly for us, but the environment has gotten good enough that one is compelled to put it on the list. 2 more are in very light red, and then 6 more are in that medium red. They were kind of out of play. The model spits out different projections. They were not in play back in August. In the current model, they are in play. And then there are 11 more districts that are already on the list. They were there in August, but more seats are now in play because of the favorable changes. So think of them as places like Bedford and Goffstown and Merrimack, mainly suburbs in and around Manchester and heading down to Nashua. We also have a couple of multi-seat districts in more exurban that are moving blue and that have entered where they become more favorable now, and we'll take a look at those. This is probably one of the next 3 slides are the ones that a lot of you are most going to want to know, and you might want to write this stuff down. So the 80th percentile, the model spits out 3 scenarios. The 80th percentile is what I call the best reasonable case. In version 1.0 in August, it projected Harris getting 54% of the 2-party vote and Joyce Craig getting 52%. In the current model, it's a little better. Harris gets 56, Craig gets 53. Now, those may seem like small differences. 2 points more for Harris, 1 point more for Craig. Pretty big deal, though. And in this simulation, we go from a best case scenario of 227 in the House back in August to 239 now. 239 would approach the record for New Hampshire for number of Democratic House seats. Oh, Catherine, I think you might not be muted. If you wouldn't mind muting, please. Oh, I think we got a few people. Catherine and Darla. So it also means that in the Senate, we would take the majority with either 13 or 14 seats, which would obviously be very exciting news. The 50th percentile outcome is the current median scenario. It is The most likely outcome right now, that doesn't mean it won't change. In version 1, Harris wins by about 4, and oh, I think Catherine Herman, could you mute, please? There we go. I think we're there. All right, thank you. So in the median scenario now, Harris goes up to 54% and Joyce gets to 49. So in the median, the most frequent scenarios, Joyce doesn't quite win, but it's margin of error stuff. It's 51-49 AOT. This is several points better, and that's a huge difference. So it goes from 196 House seats in the August projection to 217. That is, at this moment, if the election were today, this would be the center of the range of outcomes that I would project. We still have another 4+ weeks before we have to make that final projection. But this gives you an idea. This is a very exciting down ballot set of outcomes. It also is a razor thin at the Senate. We gain definitely 1, probably 2, maybe 3 Senate seats. So we can go anywhere from 11 to 13 in this median scenario. This is the current median scenario. Then we go to the worst case scenario. The worst case is not likely to happen. That's why it's the worst case, but it's the worst reasonable case. And you can see it's a lot better than it used to be. In the first model, it's a tie for president, and Joyce Craig basically replicates what happened in 2022. In the current scenario, Harris wins by 4 in the worst case, and Joyce improves upon 2022 by several points and would lose 54-46 in the worst case scenario. This brings up the floor from 164 back in August all the way up to 188. And it means that we definitely keep our 10 Senate seats and quite possibly gain 1. Some of the scenarios would spit out 12, but in this worst case scenario, we're probably at either 10 or 11 and just short of a majority. Again, this is not likely to happen, but it is the worst case reasonable scenario that one could project. So what do we know? Joyce Craig matters more in these projections at this point than Kamala Harris does. 2, things could change a fair amount still, but the cone of uncertainty is starting to narrow, particularly at the bottom range of outcomes. It's right now, it seems highly likely that at a minimum, we'd be at around the same number of House seats as last time, as we are right now, well into the 190s, and more likely that we would end up anything from 15 to 20 seats above where we are right now. The range is narrowing. Just a disclaimer, this is not a prediction of what will happen at the top of the ticket or down ballot. It is a prediction of what will happen if the top of the ticket acts certain ways based on what we know right now. The October state of play. Democrats have 137 safe House seats. That number has gone up. More seats have slid out of the likely and into the safe zone. Democrats have 50 lean to likely seats. It was 52, but a lot of that are seats that have slid in from highly competitive to now lean or likely Democrats. So they're not the same seats. Things are sliding to the good for Democrats. And you can see Democrats have 9 seats in this projection that even in a favorable environment will be competitive, but that number is down because a lot of those back in August have slid into lean to likely. The Republicans coincidentally have exactly the same number of safe House seats, 137, but that's down from 146 2 months ago. They had 43 lean to likelies. That's down to 33. And you can see the GOP now has more seats, a lot more seats that they have to protect, even in a good environment for them.
Yeah.
And so you can see this stuff has been sliding in our direction, and it makes for a much more attractive playing field for us. So I'm not going to go through all of these districts in deep detail. However, the ones that are pink or salmon, those are the new districts that have been added since August. They are altogether new districts. And I want to highlight some changes that were made along the way. If you have any specific questions about specific districts, please let me know. And I'll try to catch up with them in the chat, or certainly at the end of the presentation, we can do kind of a round robin on specific districts. Okay, Belknap County, which had very few seats in the first projection, it's a pretty tough county for Democrats generally at the moment, now has some seats that are entering the conversation. This is one of them. Belknap 1, New Hampton, Center Harbor. It's a single seat. It's very small, which makes it pretty inexpensive time and money-wise. It's one that I looked at 2 years ago. We outperformed in there. You can see the PAYCO score from last time. And it shows that in the best case scenario, we have a legitimate chance of winning this seat now. It would require the more optimal, the best reasonable case scenario, but that has now entered the conversation. It's almost an R+6. And I know that they've been talking about that seat up there. Belknap 3, Andrew Sanborn. Not the same Andy Sanborn for those that follow this stuff, different one. This is Sanborn and Tilton. And it's about an R+6, so it's at the top of the range. But because the environment is 3 points better than it was 2 months ago, R+6 districts start acting more like an R+3, R+4, a little more democratic, and that gives it a chance. And you can see that in the projection. This one, Sanborn has very strong local credentials. He's held different positions in local government in this district, and that is a characteristic that tends to bode well. And so this is one that is now entered. It was on the fringe last time. It is now for the first time entered the conversation in best case scenarios. One thing in Belknap 5, which is the other one in the county that we have, this one was in before because of Charlie St. Clair, but the environment has gotten good enough that we have scenarios where a second candidate could win. John Hildreth is a candidate that I know folks up there are excited about. Wendy Chase is a former rep in another area who's up there too. So we have multiple quality candidates. Charlie's our best shot, but you can see that even at the 50% now, Charlie wins. In the first model, it had to be the 80 percentile outcomes for Charlie to survive. So now at the 80th percentile, we have a chance of getting a second seat, which is great because right now we have 2. So it's going to be a struggle to keep 2, but now it's in the conversation. So that's a big deal. And I'm hoping to spend time up in Belknap County here in the days and weeks to come to help out with this improved environment. No real changes in Carroll County. I'm very excited about both of these districts. Carroll 3 is moving in the big picture our way. You can see in the short term, it moved a little Republican. This one almost got a 50 percentile seat. And I think if the environment stays steady or improves a little more, this one becomes even more attractive and is a priority. I think we can win a seat here. And you can see in the Wolfboro-based Carroll 6, same thing. This one almost picked off a 50 percentile seat as well. So I think that there's a real opportunity here, and there are great candidates. Let's see. I hope people can see. Are there slides to go with the comments? I can only see you. I hope people are able to see the slides. I am taking a quick look here at folks. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides? Okay, good. I see mainly thumbs because I don't really know what I would do if you couldn't. Anyway, this is a high quality pair of candidates. Question, somebody asked, why is Belknap County so conservative? Well, the short answer is the rural, there's significant rural parts to the county. Rural voters are Republican and moving more that way. Laconia has been a Rust Belt town, kind of like Claremont, parts of Cowas County, Rochester, parts of Manchester. It's a blue collar city, or at least its roots are, and that's another kind of community that's been moving Republican. That said, like I said, the environment has shifted enough that even communities like that, districts like that, now enter the conversation. Okay, this is the third new district, Cheshire 11, down in the southwestern corner of the state. Natalie Quevedo is the candidate. She's been the candidate the last 2 times, has struggled. You can see it was a tough PAYCO score. And so that was one reason why I was keeping it off of the list and the district has moved very rapidly in a Republican direction. However, you can see It is a D. It's still a D plus 1.28. And it's a very small district. And the environment has improved enough that if Joyce is that competitive and if Harris is winning by that much, this is a district that we can flip back. And we held it for a long time under Henry Parkhurst back in the day. So this is one that has now entered the conversation because of the changing environment. Let's see. Okay, not a lot of change here, except to say that now Jack wins in the 50th percentile before it was only 80th percentile. So this is an example, and we have a few of these, where it doesn't have to be optimal circumstances for us to win some of these seats. Cheshire 12 is one of them. Cheshire 17, I'm extremely bullish on this one. And they're well organized. Last time we had one of the lowest PAYCO scores in the state. I think Kristen will improve significantly upon that as a candidate. And the model improved the scenarios where we win the seat. It's no longer just the best case. And then Cheshire 18, same thing, 50th percentile added a seat. So the odds are improving rapidly in this. The median scenarios, we pick up a seat. In the 80th percentile, we almost pick up both seats in the scenario. So if the environment continues to improve, this is a district that could continue to improve in terms of another net pickup opportunity. So I'm going to keep a close eye on that. We have one seat in COAS before. We continue to have it. Good news for Eamon Kelly, the incumbent there. At the 50th percentile, he now would retain the seat. In the first projection, it was only at the 80th percentile. COAS has become an exceptionally difficult place for Democrats for the most part. And so this is a really important seat to hold on to and one that I think we need to prioritize. You can see Eamon has great local roots. The family is well known. That PAYCO score of his, 4.81, one of the better ones in the state. So him running again really made this a possible hold. Grafton County, some changes from the first projection. This is the Littleton area. A lot of good things happening up there. It's moving in a Democratic direction. In the first projection, there were scenarios with 0 seats and 1 seat. In this one, even in the worst case scenario, we would likely hold a seat now based on current numbers. And in the median, we now win 2 seats. Before it was 1. And at the 80th, we win 2. And so this is a net improvement. This is one of those districts that are responsible for the improved numbers. Jolene Farmer in 6. Her odds have improved quite a bit. It's a very competitive district. If the environment statewide really is 51.5%, Jolene is going to be favored to win this seat. I think she's going to win this seat, and the odds continue to improve in the models as we're moving towards Election Day. Same thing here. Janet's in a very strong position. It's a Democratic-leaning seat. She's an excellent candidate, doing the work, and the model showed that the improved environment means that even in the 20th percentile, she wins the seat. So this one, if it gets much better, she actually would move from the competitive zone into the safe zone. This is a nice change. This was a 4-seat difference out of 8,700 last time. Carolyn is the candidate again. She's doing the work. We got great local committees helping her up there. And the projections show, and this is new, even at the 20th percentile, Carolyn wins in this scenario. It is a flip seat. It is a jump ball seat that is moving in our direction. And a 51.5% statewide number means we win this seat now in most scenarios. That is a great change. That's Grafton County. So no new ones, but some upticks in some of our districts. Okay, Bedford. Here's a big deal. The number of seats that the model shows we can win has increased in Bedford. There were scenarios where we won 1 seat back in August. Maybe at more likely 2, most of the time not 3. This one shows a baseline of 2 in the current environment. The median is 3 with a real chance at 4. These are the kind of changes that really empower Democrats to have a chance to get into the majority and maybe actually have a little breathing room if we can follow through. So that's a big deal. This is Bedford. It was a pretty big change. There's a lot of volatility. Merrimack, another one. Merrimack has moved quite a bit. I've been spending some time there lately. We now seem to have 3 seats that are in very good shape. The model suggests that the 4th seat in the current environment would be better than 50-50. And at the 80th percentile, we have a legitimate chance at picking up a 5th seat. And that's something I'm actively working with the Merrimack Dems. We hope to have some news shortly, but I believe that a week from Saturday, the 12th, we may have an event there to support the House candidates as well as Shannon Shanley, our Senate candidate. We should have some news on that in the next day or two. This will be a priority district to try to win more seats. Manchester. This is where Joyce is uniquely interesting. We have some districts in Hillsborough, in Manchester rather, where this one, we didn't win either seat last time. We have a chance to pick up at least one of them. 2 is difficult in this scenario. There are several more blue collar wards in Manchester that have been really deteriorating for Democrats. And so this is one of the ones that are going to require real focus. Both GOP incumbents are running again. But if Joyce is up in the high 40s or better, obviously, that suggests she's probably also doing well in Manchester. And I think what the model picks up because of Manchester is if Joyce is doing well, we have a much better chance at picking up a couple extra seats in Manchester. This would be one of them. This is a new seat, first time on the list. Hillsborough 16, it's Manchester 6. Unique circumstance. 2-seat district. We only have one Democrat on the ballot. He's a good one, Dan Bergeron. Here's the problem. I think we're going to have to work hard to make sure that low engagement Democratic voters don't throw one of the 2 Republicans for their second vote and inadvertently, in effect, cross out their vote for Dan. However, the model, I put this one on because I think that it is winnable. Obviously, we can only win 1 seat, but the model showed that in the median scenario, we can win a seat. But this will require specific focus because of the unique circumstances of only having one Democrat on the ballot. This one was there before. Manch, classic. We had 2 extremely strong long-term incumbents. They both retired. That takes these out of the safe and puts them into the lean to likely. But improved numbers suggest with Joyce's performance, we should be okay here. But I put it on because it's not set in stone and it is moving in a Republican direction. And Heidi and Jane, excellent retiring House members, were able to mask some of the deterioration of Democrats in their district because of their unique strength. Here's one. We're trying to hold a seat. We're trying to flip a seat. 2 new candidates. This is one of our best flip opportunities. It's already light D. It's moving in a Democratic direction. There was underperformance last time in the district. And the model shows an improvement here that in the median scenario, we can win both seats. Before it was only 1 seat. So this is one that I think, again, it's a priority. Manchester has a lot of volatility. It's not the suburbs in this case. It's making sure that we nail down our business in Manchester. Suburb of Goffstown, like Merrimack and Bedford, scenarios have improved here. It went from the median was 1 seat. The median is now 2 seats. We have several strong candidates there. I know my PAC has put a lot of money into this district already, and it's going to continue to be a high priority. We have a legitimate chance, certainly at 2. We have a chance at 3 seats if the environment sticks. And I think this is a really exciting opportunity. Here is an excerpt that has now entered the list and started sending a little money to the candidates here. It's Hillsborough 30, the town of Hillsborough, Bennington, Antrim, Windsor. This is Hillsborough is the majority. The town of Hillsborough is the majority of this district. It's a red-leaning district. Antrim and Bennington help bring it back down to earth. You can see it's moving in a Democratic direction. 3 seats for only 4,500 voters last time. So it's a pretty small district for 3-seater. Still tough, but it shows that in the best reasonable case for the first time, it adds a seat. And that R point +4 is not that scary. So this is one that has now entered the picture and that I think we need to prioritize as a real chance if things stick. Hollis has moved as positively as any suburb in the state. This one now shows that even in the worst reasonable case scenario, um, we are favored to win both seats because we had one incumbent, one non-incumbent. The model suggested a little more volatility at the bottom end of outcomes. That is now firmed up, and I can tell you, having spent time with both candidates, we got great candidates here. So I'm very excited about this duo. Another Manchester seat, a Flotario, uh, very solid for one seat. The second seat has entered the picture, doesn't quite make it at the median, but it does make it on the higher end. This will continue to be priority. Ross Berry was a candidate, the incumbent here. He has left. That has increased the chances of winning because of the matchup for the second seat. Hillsborough 42. This one showed 0 at the 20th percentile and then 1 at 50 and 80. You can see it has shifted in a positive direction. We have a real chance at winning 2 seats in this district, and we have a great chance at winning at least 1 seat. Any seat here would be a flip, and that's a big deal. I've put Milford in for the first time. Milford was not in before because, frankly, a seat or two was pretty safe. Peter, who is I think one of my favorite members of the legislature, he was safe and continues to be safe. There is no model that shows him not winning. The question, though, is can we pick up more than one seat? That's a typo. We cannot win 8 seats in the 4-seat Milford district. I will fix that. But it does show at the 80th percentile a chance at 3 seats. Again, not 8. That's bad math. You can see it's a very light red, moving Democratic, a lot of volatility in this one. We're going to have to keep an eye on this, but it has now entered the bullseye because I think we have a chance of winning a second seat, maybe even a third seat if it's a good enough environment. The other Hillsborough-based seat, Hollis-based seat, it's a Flotario, and on this one, Karen is in good shape. She almost gets it in the model at the 20th percentile. She is likely to win, and this is a priority as well. In Merrimack County, we have a number of red seats with a Democrat in them. This one in the median, Lori is now favored in the median scenarios. That was not true earlier. It was a close race last time. It will be close again. Here's a new district. Merrimack 5 and 26 have a lot of overlap. This one got to a recount last time. I think this one could be close again for the second seat in particular. And for the first time, the model shows if Joyce and Harris are doing this, what they're doing right now, we have a chance at picking off a seat in this district. And that's exciting. I enjoyed spending time with this group last time, and hopefully will now again. Greg Sargent, his odds have improved with this environment. He has a tough competitor. It's not Dan Wolf, the last Republican in such a Democratic district, but still, Greg is taking it very seriously. We've invested in this one. We'll continue to. And the model now shows that he wins in most scenarios, including some less than ideal ones. So that's an improvement. This one, very red. It shows that in the median now, Allison is favored. That was not true back in August. So this is good news as well. Turcotte's odds have improved. On this one, we now see 2 seats as in play because of the improved environment, but 1 seat at a minimum appears to be highly likely. The trend is moving our way as well. This is a shot to pick up a second seat. I mentioned Merrimack 26. It's a lot like Merrimack 5. It's a Flotario with a few extra bluer towns. That's why the PVI is a little better than Merrimack 5. Same idea. Biggest problem here, huge district, 10,000 votes in an off-year election for 1 seat. So it's a big investment financially. That makes it tougher, but it's sneaky competitive. Dems outperformed in this district back in 2022. We go to Rockingham. Rockingham 1. This has improved. 1 seat was the median scenario. Now 2 seats is. And we have real chance at 3 seats. and this is one to keep an eye on. We absolutely can net add seats in this district. This one has improved. Mark now is favored in the median environment, the current environment. That was not the case back in August. Mark is one of the best examples of an improved statewide environment saves a Democrat in a rather red district like this. Eric Turner is now seen as very safe in most scenarios. Before there was some worst case where he wouldn't win. This is becoming much more like Exeter and a little less like Kingston. And it's kind of in between the two of them. It is now moving into the Democratic sphere of influence in that regard. Hampton invested a fair amount here. It now shows that in the median, we win all 4 seats. And even in the worst case scenario, we hold the 3 seats. Those are both improvements over August. So we have an excellent chance of picking up all 4 seats. In fact, we should be favored at this point in doing that. This is an interesting new one. I mentioned Hampton. Hampton has a flotarial as well. It shares it with Seabrook. Now, Seabrook is a really tough town for Democrats, very tough. Hampton has gotten good enough now, and the environment is good enough that this seat is in the game now. In the best reasonable case, we can win this seat. I think John Carty, I've known John a long time. He's a good candidate. I think he can overperform in Seabrook. He doesn't have to win. He just has to not get obliterated because Seabrook is so tough and Hampton is so favorable. So this one is new to the game in Rockingham 40. Not a lot of changes in Stratford County. In this one, our baseline is improved from 1 seat to 2 for worst case, and we still retain a real chance to win 3. There's a chance to flip a seat. And then we have some Rochester seats coming up. This one is stays in the game, but is moving our way. If it keeps improving, that 50th percentile would probably become Democratic as well. Chuck shows that now in the 50th percentile, he would be favored and would not have to sweat it out in all likelihood to quite the same extent. In the 20th percentile, the model almost shows him winning, and that's an improvement over last time. This was a tie in 2022, literally. And Chuck at this point should be considered favored, although knowing him, he won't act like it. Another Rochester seat, Amy Malone. Amy's a great young candidate. I think she has a real chance, and the model says it too. It is the most neutral district in New Hampshire now, and it is slowly moving our way. This one shows because of the positive environment, Amy now would be favored in the current environment, and that's an improvement over August. We have a Rochester flotarial, and this one shows a potential increase of a seat at the 80th percentile and now favored to hold at least the 1 seat we have with a real chance of picking off a 2nd seat. Rochester, a lot of volatility, a lot of variance of outcomes. This is one we're going to keep watching, and I would like to spend some time in Rochester and see what we can do there. Sullivan County, finally. Linda has improved her stead in the model. Now, even in the worst case environment, she would be favored. She has won this seat when other Democrats probably would not have in the past. It was very close last time. She is directly benefited from an improved environment. This one is strengthened as well. In most scenarios, we win all 3 seats. We're trying to flip one. In the worst case scenario, it's close. Probably that will turn to a 3 eventually as well. We are now, as a practical matter, favored to win all 3 seats. We got a great ticket there, a great match for the city of Claremont. This is an improvement. Jenny Ramsey spent a lot of time with her, and the model shows her being favored now in the median environment. That was not true, or at least it was very close back in August. And so current environment, big deal here, really neutral seat, adding 3 points of performance in the majority of scenarios moves her over the top. And this one is interesting. For the first time, we see models at the 80th percentile where we win both seats. Hope Damon is the incumbent, and it presumably would be favored even at the 20th percentile or the median. But now at the 80th, we see evidence that Cody Raymond can win that 2nd seat. That would be a flip. That would be a big deal. and there's a lot of qualitative reasons why that may be the case as well. All right, let me see. I got a few in the chat here. Okay. There we go. Okay, thank you. There's a few of the primaries that we had that I didn't clean up after the primary. I will do that. Okay, the Senate. It's a little easier, obviously, to describe. We have 8 safe Senate seats. We have 2 that are likely based on the current projection. Shannon Shanley, Donna Susie. They're in light red districts, but both would be favored and would be pretty comfortable at the moment if things hold. And we have no seats that I would describe as vulnerable or highly vulnerable. So we have 10. We are likely to begin with those 10. The Republicans have 6 that I would describe the model shows as safe. They have 3 more that are likely. If the environment continued to deteriorate for them, we can have a conversation. But there are 5 seats currently Republican that are pretty vulnerable right now. And that's where the action's at. Here they are. The most vulnerable one is probably the one, District 9, Matt McLaughlin. We've talked about him before. Models show that Matt wins in the current environment, and in fact may win if it gets a little worse in the current environment. He wins the majority of the simulations. He is raising good money. He is knocking on lots of doors. By all the ways that we can measure, he is doing the job very well, and the models reflect that as well. He is almost certainly our first flippable seat that if you're trying to say, how do we get to 11? Interestingly, then, we have a couple of seats that are right behind Matt. One of them is Stu Green. Stu, a lot of you may not know him. I'll be honest, I did not know him several months ago. Gotten to know him well now, and he's somebody I plan to spend a lot of time with here in the final 5 weeks. This is a district. Dan Innes is a first-term incumbent who has very shallow roots in the district. I know him from the Seacoast. He is not well known in his district. It is a district moving towards Democrats. It's an R+3, but in the current environment of this projection, an R+3 means it's acting like a 51-49 Republican seat, which means it's a true jump ball. So I would expect as this district to be extremely competitive. And in the current environment, I think that Stu, it's at least a coin flip. He may be favored at this moment. Another seat that's coin flip is Kevin Avard's seat. A couple wards of Nashua, Hollis, and a couple of other communities. The only reason this is not relatively blue is because of Ringe and New Ipswich. Thank you, redistricting. It is moving pretty quickly at this point towards Democrats. Ben Ming is working very hard. I think he's got the resources to do what he has to do. Another person I plan on spending a lot of time with, and I would invite you all to prioritize these Senate races. Right now, I would describe this as a coin flip. The environment, improving as it has, treats this, if anything, like Ben may be a slight favorite, but it's really going to come down to it. And I don't think we should underestimate Kevin Avard, who is pretty strong historically. He has a very low ceiling. He has a pretty high floor. So no one's going to win this seat 55-45. This is going to be a 52-48 or tighter race, no matter what happens, I think. We have a question. I was discouraged by the number of Republicans who voted in the primary versus the number of Democrats. I think I was missing something. You sound so positive. Good question. I think a lot of folks look at the primary results, the raw numbers, not necessarily who won the primaries, but the raw number of people who took a ballot in the Republican versus the Democratic. I would not overstate the predictive value of that. There were a lot of very expensive primaries going on. Both gubernatorial primaries ended up being very expensive. Keep in mind that Kelly Ayotte started with significantly better name ID than Chuck Morse, Cindy Warmington, or Joyce Craig, which was a contributing factor to increase Republican turnout for their primary. They also had competitive primaries in CD1 and CD2. We did not have one in CD1. We certainly did in CD2. The Republicans had a very competitive primary for executive council in the greater Manchester area. But historically, I would not overestimate the predictive power of it. And the real thing here is you can use top of the ticket general election polling. It is much more predictive, which explains a lot of my optimism based on the current data. Two more state Senate races I want to highlight. Rusty Talbot running up in District 1. Carrie Gendro was the incumbent. She's not running again. David Rochford, a state rep up there in the Littleton area, is running as the Republican nominee. I think that Rusty has run an excellent race and is a very strong candidate. And I've been looking at candidates for over 20 years. And the trick here will be we have a turning blue half of the district that is northern Grafton County, and we have a turning red half of the district that is Coos County. And a lot of this is going to come down to how much can we get. And AOT is likely to win this state Senate district. I'm not saying the state, but this state Senate district. And so Rusty is going to have to be able to get probably something between about 5 and 8% of people that vote for AOT to then vote for Rusty at the state Senate level. We have examples of that in both parties over the years. I think he knows exactly what he's got to do and is increasingly targeting what he has to do towards those kind of audiences. Just checking here at a couple of additional questions here. Okay. Yes. There's a lot of undeclareds that will pick up the Republican ballot. I have friends that did that, that wanted AOT to win instead of Morse, for example, or out in the coast that wanted Prescott to win instead of Joe Kelly Levasseur. But these are people that are not necessarily voting for either of them in the general. They kind of saw it as, let's get rid of the worst case scenarios in the primary. And particularly in CD1, you didn't have the additional factor of a congressional primary to kind of draw you in. Let's see here. And then one more. Jeb Bradley retired, and that is good news for us. Bill Marsh, longtime Republican, reasonable Republican. The party left him, and he has now been a strong Democratic candidate both last time and now for the full time in 2024. Is slowly moving towards Democrats. Those two House districts I mentioned earlier are great, and I think are part of why this district is in play. I expect this one to be close. Again, not unlike Rusty, Bill is going to have to outperform the gubernatorial Joyce in this district in order to win the seat, but he has potential for significant crossover appeal because of his history. So that's a big part of the reason why this seat is also there. Okay, we'll take questions in a moment. Shameless plug. I have more of these that'll be announced shortly, but Saturday night, that's 2 days from now at 6:30, we're going to be doing a version of this with a lot more nitty gritty. Yes, somebody asked for executive counsel. I'm sorry, let me do that in one moment. We're going to be having some nitty gritty, not so much about the town of Peterborough. That's a super duper blue town, but the folks there said, look, we want to learn more about it. We want to donate to help be able to get the PAC to give money to the purple and red, the real targeted races we've talked about tonight. We want to learn more about where we should be putting our volunteer energy. I thought it was a fantastic idea. I've reached out to other blue areas to do something similar in the next 2 weeks to get them into the fold, because what we need to do is to take our donors and our volunteers, our opinion leaders that disproportionately are in the really safe blue places, and export all of those assets to the purple, light, and medium red places that we've highlighted tonight. We often, like other parts of the country, have a maldistribution of Democratic donors and volunteers in the places where they are least needed locally. So being able to match our activist assets, if you will, with the places where they would make the biggest difference. That's the spirit of this. We're going to have a good time. We're going to get into the nitty gritty. We're going to get into the weeds on some of these districts. And I would invite you, you do not have to donate to attend. If you go to movethegoalpostnh.com, you'll see the link to do that. You can RSVP and not give. We'd love to see you there. If you'd like to give, the money will be going directly to these targeted races. If you can't make it, but you want to give, Obviously, this is a critical time. I've got about 2 more weeks where being able to get the money and give the money matters much more. So I would ask you to consider that. Even $25 or $50 makes a pretty big deal in these House races where I'm trying to get an extra couple $100 beyond what we've done in the key races. So every time I get a little extra, this allows me to get it out the door. Let me briefly talk about executive council. And I'm going to stop the share here for a minute. All right. Let me briefly talk about executive council. As most of you probably know, we have 5 seats. One of them, District 2, Karen Leod Hill, who's a wonderful candidate, a longtime friend. She won that primary in impressive fashion, and she will, in all likelihood, represent that blue district that represents most of the blue communities in Western New Hampshire and going all the way into Concord. The other 4 are actually pretty similar in their PBI. They're all light red. Now, you might say, well, that's amazing then. In this environment, we should win them all. If they're all like R+2, R+3. And here's the good news. They're all going to be in play to some extent if Joyce and Harris are doing as well as the latest model suggests. But here's the thing. Much more than Senate or House, the performance of the executive council candidates is so directly in a one-to-one basis connected to how the gubernatorial nominee does that if Joyce in a given executive council district is not getting pretty darn close to 50% or more, obviously, it is very difficult for an executive council candidate to overcome more than about a point, maybe 2 points of underperformance by the gubernatorial nominee, because people don't know what the district, they don't know what a counselor is. It's very hard to build name ID for that race. It's very hard to canvass for that race because it's such in most of them, a very big expanse. There's just not a lot of evidence in the 20 years I've been looking at this that an executive council candidate can overperform by, say, 4 or 5 points, the way that I can give you plenty of examples of House and Senate candidates that do that. So that's what we need. And I've said half jokingly to executive council candidates is you should do everything you can to help Joyce now, because the better Joyce does, the better you do. Every extra dollar Joyce gets to spend to improve her performance, you will get most of that same trickle-down performance. And I can say that with more directness than I can for Senate or House. Somebody noted that Chris Pappas outperformed when he was an executive counselor. Chris Pappas, and I can say this, it's not just because I like him a lot, Chris Pappas is currently the best politician in New Hampshire in either party. He outperforms better than any other politician. He has, in a world where it's very hard to have positive net approval, Chris Pappas has positive net approval. If you look at polling about Chris, he has unique ability, particularly in Greater Manchester, to get crossover appeal. That was true when he was a state rep. That was true as an executive counselor. It's true as a member of Congress. It's true as a restaurateur. I mean, there was just a story in the New York Times this week about how the Puritan is the foundational home of the chicken tender. That was a national story this week in the New York Times. There's no amount of advertising that Chris Pappas can pay for that will be better than people being reminded that he is the Puritan backroom guy. And then you get to know him, and you know what? You find out he's just as likable as you think he'd be. So he is a fantastic politician, and I would argue he may be the best political athlete in New Hampshire. He is and Ray Burton, when he was an executive counselor, Republican in the North Country forever, he also outperformed regularly because he transcended party for a generation. Pappas, in his own way, has an element of that. So that's the explanation as to why Chris uniquely, he is a unique bird in that regard. And that's a high compliment that I'm giving him. So, okay. Questions? Any district. I can also call a district back up if you'd like. Any districts that weren't mentioned? Any candidates that maybe you wanted to ask about? Glad to do that. Yes.
This is Gary. A question for you. It's not so much on the candidates per se. Can you address the issue of the undervote? Because one of the things I'm worried about is that even though we have the top of the ticket, there's many districts that have multiple choices. And how do we tackle the undervote?
Gary Merchant from Claremont. Thank you, Gary. So one of the challenges we have in a multi-seat district, and some of you maybe have heard me talk about this before, and a lot of these seats you saw, they're multi-seat districts. We see a legit drop-off in participation in a way that we do not see in single-seat House districts. So if about 97% of people that walk in the booth will vote for governor, president, Congress, almost 97% for executive council, it's about 97% for state senate. It's actually about 97% for state rep if it is a single seat district. But the second it moves into a multi-seat, whether it's 2 or 4 or 8 or whatever, it goes from about 97% participation down into the 80s, sometimes down to the low to mid 80s. And the reason for that, I think, is people are not familiar with the idea of vote for no more than 4. That's weird. Nobody else in the country generally has people do that. And so they're afraid to overvote and in effect spoil and have their ballot thrown out. And so when in doubt, they will undervote. That's part of it. I think the other part of it is, let's be honest, most people don't know 4 candidates on the ballot if they've got to know, vote for up to 4. It's just not something that people do. There aren't a lot of people that would stick around for over an hour on a Zoom call to get into the nitty gritty of like Belknap 2 or something. We're the weird ones. And that's a compliment. Most of the voters are not odd in this way. They don't know who most of these people are. They're coming out for president, governor, probably Congress. And after that, I don't know. And so we see a lot of drop off there. So my advice for candidates in the multi-seat districts, there's plenty of evidence to suggest the following. Even relatively regular voting Democrats show lots of evidence of either dropping out, leaving some blank, undervoting, or even worse, voting for a Republican to fill in the blank if they know a lot about, if they know something about the Republican and it's not damning. A lot of people like the feeling of being able to say that they don't vote for the party, they vote for the person. And I'm not talking about 20 or 30% of the vote. We're talking about 5, 7, 10% of the vote of the voters, the electorate, who have this kind of behavior. And that's all it takes in a lot of these districts to determine the difference between winning and losing. And so my advice in the multi-seat districts, do not take the relatively high engagement Democrat for granted that they will obviously vote for all the Democrats at the bottom of the ballot. That's just not true. The evidence does not support that. It supports that they will vote like that for 1 or 2, maybe the best known. But for the candidates that are not as well known, I think that's a very dangerous assumption to make. And I can point to a number of districts in 2022 that because of that phenomenon, we probably lost when we probably could have and should have won. So do not take that for granted. It's probably, and don't be afraid to tell people explicitly, vote for 4, if or whatever the number is in your district. Another question I see here, address how campaigning in a, there we go. Campaigning in a red district can still help up ballot. Well, there's a bunch of things. One of the things we find is that Republican voters and low engagement Democratic voters prioritize issues in a very different way from high intensity Democratic voters. High intensity Democratic voters, their top issues are abortion, democracy, climate, LGBTQ plus issues, Trump's malfeasance. If you go to Republican voters and low engagement Democrats, who are a lot of the people that are going to be coming out for a presidential election that maybe weren't coming out for the midterm. So these are those extra voters. They're not talking about that. They're talking about inflation, housing cost. They're talking about groceries, cost. cost, cost. They're also talking about immigration, and mainly in the context of jobs. Look at the J.D. Vance debate performance the other night. Obviously, he said a lot of things that I think were just completely not true, and or that I disagree with. However, he did a very good job most of the night of projecting Trumpism in a cleaned up way. And look at what he kept coming back to: cost, immigration. He didn't mention cats being eaten a single time that I'm aware of. He was very focused. And uh, and even on the, remember, if you watched, even on the climate issue, remember JD Vance got asked, are you and Trump, do you believe in climate change? And within 20 seconds, he got the question about reshoring American jobs, because we are less carbon intensive in the way we manufacture than many of the countries that got the jobs outsourced in the 90s and 2000s. So even on a climate question, which he does not want to answer, that's not their strength, he wanted to bring it back to the economy, jobs, cost, immigration. So when you are hitting the road and you're talking to a low engagement or Republican voter, a way that you connect those voters back to the Democratic Party, don't lean in necessarily on abortion or climate. Here's the secret: they probably agree with you and us on abortion, climate, LGBTQ plus, and so forth. They just don't prioritize it. And if they think that we are prioritizing abortion and climate instead of the price of groceries, we're going to lose low engagement Democrats, and particularly winnable, sort of Republican leaning independent voters, because they think that we are out of touch with their needs. They don't disagree with us on the issues. They just prioritize them differently. That's probably a key takeaway message I have when you're talking to Republicans and low engagement Democrats, the kind that are only coming out because it's a presidential year. There's a question about Senate District 8, Dave Trumbull. I was at the Hillsborough County Dems a few Sundays ago. I emceed that, and I said a few things about Dave and his race. I love Dave. He's a great guy. And the model shows that while there are scenarios beyond the 80th percentile where Dave's district, which is a big district that winds from Ware all the way through out to Claremont, it's about an R plus 5.9. If I'm going to keep looking at that one, as well as Carlos Cardona's race in the greater Laconia area, those are two races where if things stabilize at this level or improve further, they may kind of pop back in. And I've seen in the past Senate races that at the last minute pop in, and examples where we've won races that you didn't really see coming until about 2 weeks to go. And those are two that have now moved very close to the edge of the tipping point scale. And so I'll be keeping those in mind. And I think Dave and Carlos are working really hard, and their districts are kind of slowly coming towards us. Let's see. I see a few other questions. Lucy Weber mentions, back to the down ballot, a poster I hold at the polls all day is a blown up copy of the down ballot, printed on cardboard with all the Dems prominently filled in, plus an exhortation to vote Dem top to bottom, or bottom to top. I think it is not a bad idea to have a visual representation of all of the House ovals being colored in, perhaps with some kind of eye-catching fun. I wouldn't be edgy about it, and I'm not suggesting this is at all. Something that draws the eye to voters who are going to be just blizzarded with signs, right, as they're walking in. I think that that's a way to remind people, okay, it is okay to vote for 3. Because remember, that's kind of weird. So if you show them it's not weird, in fact, it's totally legal and I'm asking you to do it, I think it's a good idea. It's a very inexpensive, easy way to do that. Let's see. Oh, Kat, I see Kat.
I'm one that does better videos too. I'm gonna do a cool video for Mommy's campaign.
Oh,
Make
there we
people
go.
vote Kayla Hewitt.
Oh, I think somebody might need to mute. I think somebody's, oh, there we go. In my district, Kat mentions how In her district, the scenarios now have both Democrats winning, and it is true, it is quickly improving, especially in this current environment. Hillsborough 35 is the flotarial that includes Hollis, if my memory is correct. I'd have to go back and look at which one. 35.
No, 30 is Hollis only.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's yours. Okay, I'm sorry.
35 is Hollis only.
The short answer is yes, it is basically the recent uptick. The going from 48 to 51 and a half, basically, is such an enormous difference. And it takes a lot of light red districts and it functionally makes them light blue. Now, we have to watch it closely. They have to continue to go in that direction. But if they do, you saw the projections. At the 50th percentile, we get into the mid 210s. At the 80th percentile, we get deep into the 230s. We approach a record. I'm not if we do another one of these in 2 or 3 weeks, which we will when we have more data, and it shows a downward tick, don't throw stuff at me. I'm going to give it to you straight. So this is not me looking in light blue colored glasses. They're clear lenses. It's just that the horizon is blue. It is blue on the other side of the lens. If it deteriorates, well, that will be reflected in subsequent projections. Let's see. We got a few more minutes. Question: have you looked at the Sullivan County? 3 seats, 1D against. Let's see. Yes. So there's a few. This is Kathleen Fountain has a good question about some of the other Sullivan seats. There are other districts that are not in this wave, but that are basically now a tick away from being in there. So one of them is Sullivan 3. So Nikki Murphy is running in a district that includes the town of Newport. Now, Newport has been in recent years a difficult town for Democrats. In fact, we did not have recently a local committee. The numbers were kind of going the wrong way. However, there was some evidence of overperformance, despite all that, for Democrats in recent elections there. We've had some strong candidates do well there before. I see Biddy Irwin here, for example. But we have folks who have done well there, and there is some quantitative evidence of movement going in the positive direction for Democrats. Right now, the challenge is it remains about an R+7 district, and that's an extremely difficult environment. If the environment continued to improve, and the 80th percentile becomes closer to the median, think 2018 good, right? Like that was a hell of a year. Or 2006, which was the mother lode of all Democratic years this century. All of a sudden, a district like Sullivan 3 comes into play. So I'm hoping to do some things in Sullivan County in the days to come, resources, spend some time there. And I would like to get together folks that are in that one tier off kind of districts, including Nikki and Sullivan 3, because you don't want to be flat-footed if the environment continues to improve. That's the thought process there.
Before you leave,
yes.
Nikki C. Ellis.
Yes, Ellis.
I wonder, do we suggest to them that they bullet vote? She's in a 3 district. We have 1 Democrat running and 3 Republicans.
And which district is this?
This is Nikki's district.
Oh, I
District
see.
3.
Yeah, definitely where we have 1 Democrat running in a multi-seat. I think I mentioned in Manchester we have one of those with Dan Bergeron. You definitely want bullet voting, because if anybody votes for a Republican as well, they are in effect crossing out their vote for, in this case, Nikki, because the bar is rising for what the number of votes Nikki will have to get in order to beat the lowest Republican. Of course, you can also ask people to write in Democrats for the other seats, but that A, won't lead to another victory, and B, will probably complicate the ask in a way that will make it less likely that they'll do anything. So I do think Nikki in her race, Dan Bergeron in his race in Manchester, a handful of others where we have this situation, to the extent that we can try to minimize the chance of Democrats voting for some Republicans to fill in the missing, we want to do that as much as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Somebody mentioned, yeah, certainly at the top of the ticket. I hope this didn't come across the wrong way. Congress, state Senate. I mean, for all, and in the multi-town House districts, just because I mentioned John Carty in Rockingham 40, that's Hampton and Seabrook. Luckily, it's not like the Electoral College, where if he doesn't win Seabrook, he gets none of the votes that come out of Seabrook, right? So every extra vote in a red town that we are squeezing out from president down to state rep takes the pressure off of the blue towns. And so my message, I'll do presentations in some of the reddest towns in New Hampshire, and some folks will be like, well, why are you doing that? They have no chance of winning a House seat in 2024 or whatever. And I'm like, well, but that's not the only goal here. We're trying to maximize performance because they are all part of larger districts. They're part of larger House, Senate, Council, Congress, Governor, U.S. Senate, and President. Every vote matters, and they all count the same in those races. And we're trying to take the pressure off of all the bluer towns. And I think it's an important message to remind people in the red towns. And of course, a place like Bedford, we're talking about winning anything from 2 to 4 seats in Bedford now for state house. We're talking about the state Senate candidate being favored in that district now in this model. That didn't just happen. That's the result of many years of movement, demographic change, a great local committee, strong candidates that ran when it wasn't obvious that they were going to win. It was Sue Mullen winning multiple times and being the first Democrat to win since FDR. That made it a little bit easier for Catherine Rombo to win, which made it a little bit easier for Lauren Fox to win. That's how this stuff happens. So Bedford wasn't always competitive. And, whether you're Pelham or New Ipswich or, Alton, the reddest places, it starts somewhere. And it starts with a mentality like that. And that's what we spend time on when I do events in really red towns. Let's see. I do want to close this out by 8, so I want to quickly look to see if I got any quick hit questions here. Let's see. And I apologize. I'm scrolling through. These are some good questions. You can also email me through the website at movethegoalpostnh.com if you have any specific questions. I'll try to answer them quickly, particularly if they're on a specific race. Let's see. Somebody asked about the Allenstown district in Merrimack County. That one is my memory on that. It's obviously a red leaning district, but if my memory is correct, that's one that we have as competitive. And in the median scenario, if my memory is right, we have winning it now, but did not have winning it in the prior model. That's an example of a district where the improved environment's a big deal. Let's see. Chuck Grassi reminds me, he's had 3 tied races. I would have ulcers if I had run. Somersworth, somebody asked about Somersworth. The Somersworth on paper, it's a fascinating place. On paper, Somersworth should be trending Republican. It's a blue-collar, Milltown sort of ethos city. We're seeing that in parts of Manchester. We're seeing that in Laconia. Rochester had some of that, although it's kind of bouncing back. Claremont has had some of that, most of Coos County. But Somersworth up to now has not had that to the same extent. Why? I think that Somersworth, my theory is it's had more of an injection of immigrants in the last 10 to 15 years than most other communities in New Hampshire as a percentage of the population. And I think that has injected a different kind of an additional variable into the body politic, which has probably neutralized some of the turn to red that we may have seen otherwise and that we've seen in other similar communities. Also, the improving environment makes those seats likely safe, although I do have an eye on that because in the long run, I do have some concerns about Somersworth if it trends the way that similar communities have in New Hampshire. Let's see here. Any more? Got about 2 minutes. Like I said, move the goalpost nh.com. I'm going to be trying to put more stuff up. Tomorrow, I will have this video on my YouTube channel. You can find that pretty easily. Go on YouTube, you put in my name, and should be able to find that pretty quickly. I try to upload additional videos as time allows. And I am doing events around the state. If you in your community or your House or Senate district, if you'd like to get something together, it's a combination of a primer on what's going on, trying to help me understand it better, to help get resources to you, including financial resources, and also a pep talk. I promise you that irrespective of the data, I will always be honest about the data, but I will also leave people with practical to-dos that I think make them feel empowered and focusing on what they can do. And I think if we do that, especially given the current environment, I think what we can do is pretty darn impressive. But none of this is given. It is ephemeral. It is up to us. And I think that's the attitude we got to have here in the final 5 weeks. So it is now 8 o'clock, and I promised to try to avoid 2-hour talks, and that's when I plan to do stuff for 15 minutes. Anyway, I digress. See. So I'll leave it at that. I really appreciate y'all being on tonight. And please feel free to get a hold of me anytime. If I could be helpful, that's the goal. Go out there. And I really appreciate all that y'all are doing in your communities.